It was a chilly late October morning. Halloween is only a week away, and everyone's going through their morning routine. The kids are getting ready for school, and the adults are getting ready for work, as was it seems like any other day. The TV was on just for background noise as we go through our morning ritual. The kids walked out the door to head to the stop, and I turned the TV off as I walked out the door for work. I climbed into my car as it sat on the driveway. I started the car, and the engine was still cold, so I decided to wait for it to warm up while I sat there waiting. I began looking around at the neighbors coming out of their houses and either walking to the bus stop or climbing into their cars, just a normal routine. But something was off that day. There was a strange car parked down the street with a couple of guys in it who were staring at our house. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Was I being paranoid? Was there really a threat out there? Or was it just my imagination running wild? While I sat there waiting, I began sipping on my coffee. Just then a radio program began playing. The host started talking about an announcement that NASA sent out about the 2-decade science mission called Scientific Mission Kuiper Belt. I didn't recognize this mission, and I never realized that NASA had this mission. The hosts continued to talk about it. They said that NASA sent 20 probes to the belt, and they were going to go around and scan asteroids. And if they found any promising hits, then the probes would land on the asteroid and take a core sample of it. The hosts continued to speak about the mission. They said that NASA announced that the mission was a success, and that the 20 probes completed their mission early, and all of their sample trays were full. Each probe was carrying 1 ton worth of core samples back to Earth. NASA was hoping to find new elements to add to the periodic table, and maybe in the future, a new mission with an automated mining project to mine these elements out of the asteroids. They were hoping to find ice samples that may harbor life, like little microbes. They were looking for extreme phials, single-celled organisms that live in extreme environments. And the scientists were hoping that these extreme phials could consume items that we cannot recycle or safely destroy on Earth. Earth has a lot of them. Here on Earth, they consume a lot of different items, both natural occurring and man-made. But they were hoping for more. Like the project director said, nice surprises. As the hosts continued to say, the plan was elegant. The probe would scan with an AI intelligence. The AI would quickly analyze the scan and determine if there were any interesting targets. If there were, it would tag the targets, and then the probes would fly around and begin landing on the targets and start coring out samples. The New Horizons probe has returned to Earth after a 15-year journey to the Kuiper Belt. It's carrying with it 1 ton of core samples from the belt. But here's the thing. NASA was not expecting the probes to come back all at once. They were expecting them to come back one at a time. This means that the Kuiper Belt is full of interesting targets. It's basically like a candy store for scientists. They can only speculate what kind of samples might be in there. Everyone at NASA was very excited. All of the probes were ahead of schedule. They were expecting a 30-year mission, and it's only been 15 years. That means they only scanned 0.2% of the Kuiper Belt. That is so exciting. It means there are so many wonders out there that we haven't even discovered yet. NASA is saying that if the samples are very promising, they will plan for a new mission back out to the belt. They need startography to look at the samples that came back and then go to the next target. If the next mission gets approved, where should we send it? We could send it to the middle of the asteroid belt, or we could send it to the outer solar system. It's up to you guys to decide. Let us know in the comments down below. When the probes land on the chosen destination, each one will be isolated and loaded onto trucks that will carry them to a quarantine building. Once the probes are inside the building, they will open up the sample trays and place the samples into quarantine cases and then transport them to a lab for testing. The scientists do not know what they are bringing back from the asteroid belt, so they want to take as many precautions as possible. The isolation process that will offload each probe can take several months. Once the probes are decontaminated, they will take them apart and examine them. If there are any failures, they can study them. This way, if the next mission gets approved, they can start planning for the next design and construction of the next set of probes. So where should we send the next mission? The middle of the asteroid belt or the outer solar system? You decide. The year is 2033. You're listening to the radio in your car. A program you were a part of when you were younger has just landed on a faraway planet. You can't help but feel a sense of pride knowing that you are a small part of something so big. The samples have been offloaded and decontaminated. It's now up to the scientists to study them. But it could take a year or more for them to find any answers. And what if they don't find anything? You wonder what it would be like to actually find the origins of life or prehistoric life. This felt electric. You pull into the parking lot at work, and you turn off the radio. You had to focus on the task at hand. But as the day goes on, you can't help but think about what they could find in those samples. Late December comes fast, and the news reports announce the probe's descent and landing on their designated pads. Each one of the 20 probes had a safe landing. So far, it's a flawless mission. But now the real work begins. Each probe is sprayed with a gaseous decontaminant solution and then wrapped in isolation plastic wrap before being loaded onto trucks and transported to the secured laboratory facility. The excitement begins to build as the possibility of new life is a real thing now. But as Christmas and New Year's come around, the thought of life on other planets simmers down to just a holiday. Winter had passed. Now it's spring. Life has returned to normal. The kids are looking forward to summer break and the vacation trip. And I am just muttering through work, secretly thinking about vacation. Months later, it was fall again. And the news is reporting that we have a new flu bug going around, nothing to ordinary this time of the year. And in the meantime, NASA announced they'd found frozen single-celled organisms in some of the core samples from the belt. The microbes were no longer alive, but their existence is proved. Life had existed out there. Labs isolated the samples, faded them, and cataloged the source asteroids for future expeditions. The mood shifted from caution to relief. After environmental testing, the authorities declared the samples safe and said protective suits were no longer required. A few weeks later, it was looking to be a mild winter. Doctors were warning that this can be a bad flu season. Being a mild winter, with cold winters viruses have a slower growth rate. They are encouraging people that have flu symptoms to stay home. Then Thanksgiving rolled in and more reports started popping up. People falling ill with what looked like a really bad flu. Doctors said not to worry. Stay home, stay hydrated, and any severe symptoms, please go to the doctor or the nearest emergency room. But you will be fine. Even though the flu was hitting hard, families still gathered anyway. Some were sick, but people were just happy to be together. Things have gotten really bad. After Thanksgiving, the flu intensified. People started losing their voices and their appetites. Some groups of people had massive fevers and wound up hospitalized. There were even reports of violent behavior. People were attacking other people. Doctors attributed it to the fever spike causing hallucinations. Then there were reports of people biting others. At first, legacy media dismissed most of the social media clips as hoaxes. But the images kept surfacing, and officials could no longer ignore them. The CDC went into lockdown to examine the infected. Now legacy media could no longer dismiss the claims. There is a bigger problem than just the flu. The CDC offered some advice. People showing symptoms need to isolate. Family members living in the same home need to disinfect everything. I tried keeping the kids off the social media. I didn't want them to panic, but the social media feeds were filled with live streams from quarantined homes. People that were infected in isolated rooms were pounding on walls, doors, and then suddenly attacking whoever opened the door. Strangers began assaulting people in the streets. Police fired on attackers who charged them. Cities began to spiral out of control. Currently, this is only happening in the United States. And the world decided to close their borders to all travel from the United States, that is vehicle, air, and sea traffic. Planes that were in the air either had to turn around and go back to their original airport or divert to another airport. Planes that left the United States had to turn around and head back here. Same thing with the ships. The year is 2024, and this is a real emergency broadcast. While this outbreak was taking place, the CDC was working around the clock and even asked for assistance from the World Health Organization to assist on this virus. The federal government declared martial law and called up the state's National Guard, but they were straining due to service members also falling ill. The president asked Congress to suspend the Posse Comitatus Act so federal troops could be deployed domestically. All federal military bases were on hard lockdown and isolated. Troops inside these bases were not ill. Congress met, debated over the situation, and approved the suspension. Once authorized, the president ordered federal forces to the hardest-hit areas and recalled 30,000 troops from overseas. Some governors also mobilized their state militias to assist with traffic control, security at emergency rooms, smaller tasks that the police didn't have to worry about. The emergency room were filling to capacity and spilling out into their parking lots. This is a full-blown disaster. By the end of December, with Christmas and New Year's Eve looming, the government urged people to avoid gatherings. Many ignored the warnings. Then the national alerting system tone blared through every device. I ordered the kids up to their rooms, and I turned the TV on and watched the White House briefing room fill with officials. Then the president stepped up to the podium and looked into the camera and said, "My fellow Americans." The president addresses the nation for the first time since the outbreak began. And I'm going to tell you, it gets crazier and crazier. Just when you think it can't get any crazier, it does. Here's what he said. "We are in unprecedented times. We have not seen anything like this since the 1918 Spanish flu and then COVID." And then he said that he would like to introduce Dr. Sean McCullen from the CDC. He's on a remote feed. McCullen thanked the president, and then he took a breath and explained that they traced the outbreak back to one of the Kuiper Belt samples. They have determined that there was a dormant microorganism locked in suspended animation that had somehow slipped past quarantine. When the lab stopped wearing full protective equipment, the organism now active began spreading. They were able to track down and isolate patient 0 and were working on a vaccine to lessen the virus S effects. We are giving the virus a name. It is called Necro Erebus virus. And the president interrupted the CDC doctor and brought forward from the Army Medical Battalion, General Adkins. He thanked the president and began saying, "We have devised a two-pronged military response. First, bolster hospitals with medical personnel and erect tent cities with HEPA filtration and purified oxygen to slow the illness." They were also designing and constructing armored suits to protect personnel when removing the sick from homes. And then the general introduced Major General MacArthur from the Marine Corps. The Major General took the podium and said in no uncertain terms that lawlessness will not be accepted. They were going to restore order to the streets. That was their main mission, to uphold law and order. He also said that they are assisting all local authorities. We will enforce the law. Do not riot. Do not loot. All of his Marines will be fully kitted out. He promised that food production and supply chains would continue. Stores and farms would remain operational. But people are required to wear masks out in public. They must be N95, and if you make homemade masks, they need to have a filter with a 0.03 micron, and then you must sanitize them after every use. The president took the podium again. He looked tired and weary. "I will not sugarcoat this," he said. "Again, we are in an unprecedented period. Our CDC scientists are combing through every piece of data. We're leaving no stone unturned. We LL have a briefing every day, so you know your government is still here and working for you." He paused. "We will brief you again at the same time tomorrow." Weeks blurred. The president kept his word, and every day there was a press conference. But as time went on, the virus worsened. Cities fell. The military fought back, but seemed to be losing ground. They were forced to evacuate towns around big cities. They leveled the towns and positioned themselves into a killing field. As the affected left the city, the military would use Reaper drones, and they dropped cluster bombs on them. This helped thin the undead out, but the president's daily briefings grew bleaker and bleaker. One day he admitted that 2/3 of the U.S. population was infected. Then hope began to drain away. At the U.S.-Mexico border, hundreds of Americans tried to scale the fence. The Mexican military took a page from the U.S. military and warned them not to enter Mexican territory. But they didn't listen. The military also created killing fields. As they laid on the ground, one by one, they began to change and move. The infected weren't merely sick, they were changing. Social media was trending with what people were calling it, the zombie virus. The World Health Organization ordered a hard lockdown and isolation of the United States. The NATO nations met in Geneva and agreed to a full blockade. Canada and Mexico accepted NATO troops to fortify their border, with secret orders to stop Americans at any means necessary. A huge despair formed across the country. People reinforced their homes with plywood. They covered their windows and constructed makeshift fences to slow the zombies down. Some neighborhoods formed small, heavily guarded enclaves with armed watches and tree stands throughout their neighborhoods. All of the large cities had fallen. Remaining authorities and military units pulled back. Then the Air Force came in and firebombed the cities. They were trying to thin the zombies out. In some states, this worked, and in other states, it failed. The zombies were still on the move, looking for the living. This was all a Hail Mary. I have been busy barricading my house like everyone else. I tore the floor in my attic out. These were some old seasoned wood, tough as nails. Then I emptied my kids' sandbox and filled several sandbags. I was hoping these could become tripping obstacles for the zombies. And finally, I pulled out the old generator and got it in good working order. Finally, I was able to make dinner and sit down with the kids. We kept most of the lights off at night and ate by candlelight. And we used rechargeable lanterns to move around in the house. Then during the day, I ran the generator to chill down the fridge and freezer, recharge batteries, all the normal stuff. And at night, we did the same thing again. One night, I pulled my old shortwave radio out of the closet. I haven't used it in years. I thought I would keep it around for emergencies. I turned the radio on, and it sputtered to life. My kids were amazed. They'd never seen it before. Just then, the national alert tone went off. A voice cut through the static. All remaining civilian broadcasts stand by. Then another voice came on. There has been a containment breach. And just static, the feed blinked. And the voice changed again, low, unfamiliar, and perfectly calm. It said we were wrong. Then the static swallowed the message. It sent cold chills through my spine. Then the transmitter went dead. I sat back and wondered what that message meant. We were wrong. Then you could hear the wind hollow through the trees. Then a hollow thump of something moving outside. This happened several times before at night. I just ignored it. But tonight there was something tapping on the porch roof. First one, then another, like a measured footstep. Then, from across the street, someone screamed. Not the animal scream of the infected or the harsh bark of a madman, but a sound I knew too well, The sound my neighbor made when he laughed, it stopped. Everything stopped. Something shifted in the dark. And then, just outside my boarded window, a voice I recognized, soft, wrong, and full of patience, no living person should have, whispered, "What is happening?" Phantom static, where the phantoms speak through the static.